floor at 10, and it's already 9:30.
Oh, wait, we might be live. We might be live, Senator.
All I had to do was say farewell, and here we go. Okay, so good morning. It is Wednesday, May 5th. It's 9:29 a.m. This is a meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We are visiting this morning with Commissioner Peter Walk, who we had asked to give us a big picture summary of water quality work. And he's done some figuring on our behalf just to get a size, an estimate of the magnitude of all the work that's out there. So I'd like to just jump right in and turn it over to Commissioner Walk. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Peter Walk, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. Appreciate IT's quick work and Jude's persistence in getting us online. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll bring up what I had previously sent you, which was in response to the conversation we had around sort of prioritization of sort of where should we look to spend ARPA dollars and other potential dollars on water infrastructure work. And I'll leave it at water infrastructure, because this covers not only our sort of traditional clean water space in terms of wastewater treatment plants and the like, but also both public and privately owned dams and drinking water, stormwater work as well. So happy to go. Can you all see that the water infrastructure universe of need? Does that come up?
Yes.
Okay. I normally have a little glowing box around it, and I don't see that this time. So I just wanted to confirm that. So what just to provide a little bit of background, this was developed based on sort of the best estimates that we had at the time. We put it together in relatively short fashion, so it could definitely be refined over time. But these are really order of magnitude kind of estimates around what we think is the likely universe of need. And I can go through sort of where some of these estimates come from, but just trying to sort of paint the picture for you in terms of where the opportunities lie, right? There is no shortage of investment needed. It's not necessarily that these all need to be state dollars or they need to be the federal dollars. They're a mix of public and private funding throughout. But let me just walk through some of the bigger categories for you.
Sure. Can I ask a quick startup question?
Sure.
Is there any relationship between, so this is a sort of gross estimates of the money required to address each of these areas. Are you planning to get to how amongst this very large, expensive universe, the prioritization happens as well?
Sure, I'll get to where our ARPA prioritization comes from, and then sort of what, in my mind, some of the other opportunities and sources of funding could be to address some of these.
Okay, great. And Senator Westman has a question for you.
I don't have a question. I was just going to say, I love the chart, and I think it's very helpful in that starting point. I think what you just said, Chairman Bray, is really important about the priority list on that. My only criticism is the print on the bottom is so small for an old person, I can't see any of it. So make sure that you help me with.
I will do color and.
I love the colors, and I can see the colors. That print is, oh baby.
I apologize. I will add. I will send you a new version.
Can you see me?
I did not think we'd ever get into Zoom microscope land, but
I can see it now.
All right. So at your far left in that medium color blue is what was estimated in the treasurer's report several years ago in terms of what we thought the wastewater repair and upgrade need was. All of these are put in sort of a 10-year time frame to provide some idea of what we're looking at, in part because we think that the American Jobs Act money will likely sort of have that kind of time frame. So this far left, I'm going to work from left to right. So this is, can you guys see can you see my mouse?
Yep.
Okay, so I will use that as a visual orientation cue. That also includes some dollars for asset management as well. We think that's a real priority in terms of helping communities develop asset management plans so that they not only can make the repairs that they need, but they can sustain those fully functioning systems into the future to avoid the sort of costly repairs that come from some of the deferred maintenance that can happen. The next line is your light green. That is the equivalent for the drinking water systems around the state, public drinking water systems around the state. This is built around the 2015 EPA Drinking Water Needs Survey, updated to 2021 dollars. It ends up being about $37.4 million per year, and then is just extrapolated over a 10-year period. So it's a rough estimate, as much of these things are. Moving to this solid blue block here where my mouse is, that's 3-acre stormwater retrofits. That is what we have estimated based on a per acre value of, in terms of what we think the number of 3-acre sites in total acreage looks like, times a rough calculation of a per acre retrofit cost. So that's 5,320 acres in total covered by the 3-acre stormwater permit, at $50,000 an acre of retrofit. Not all sites are going to be that expensive. Some will be more. So that's an average value that we put to that. And so those are mostly, there's a mix of public and privately owned facilities. We're working now on schools, which are obviously large areas that we're trying to work to address with the Basin program. But this is one of the areas of unmet need in terms of the cost of doing our clean water work that we've all known is sort of coming. And now that we're moving ahead with the permit, those bills are going to start to come due, which is why we included this as a significant portion of the ARPA investment. Going down to this green block below, those are actually what we anticipate the need at privately owned dams are. That's it's a very coarse estimate based on the sort of, if we assume that there is need and investment in roughly a third of the privately owned dams around the state. So that gives you a sense of sort of the order of magnitude of what we're talking about in terms of our legacy infrastructure in the dam world.
And did we do a state match or just a contribution because dams are just too expensive for?
So none of these speak to the sources of money. It's just a reflection of what the sort of full cost.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there is, to my knowledge, there's no state contribution to privately owned dams.
Got it.
It's just a reflection of kind of where the need is out there.
Got it. Thank you.
And then moving up to your orange block here, that's stormwater impaired waters. These are long-term efforts to address stormwater work in stormwater impaired waters. That we roughly equate that to about half of the universe of the 3-acre world. Again, that's a really rough estimate put together in fairly short order, but that's why you get a sort of a half of the 3-acre number. From there, that's $130 million. Relatedly, I'll just mention in a separate line, the MS4 community work in the stormwater world is about half again of that. So that's $65 million in this light gray where my mouse is. This is one area where having printouts would be really useful. Someday we'll be back in the building. And then this dark blue box here is it's a little bit lumped together just because we included it as a lump to create a smaller number of buckets in the ARPA proposal that the governor put forward. It's a combination of needed new wastewater and water infrastructure, drinking water infrastructure in our villages where there is no additional capacity at individually owned systems, and it's standing in the way of our clustered development that we'd like to see, where people are pushing out further into the exurbs, if you will. That also includes pretreatment work, whether that be heavy, high concentration waste producers like our breweries and distilleries, or the need to address PFAS through pretreatment at various entities prior to it going into our wastewater treatment plants. That is that one is really rough. And I'm sure it's probably higher than that, frankly. The next blue box right below that is $100 million for state-owned dams. A lot of that comes from the work that we'll need to do and we're planning to do with Waterbury Dam, and I think we've talked to you about that some, and then other state-owned dams, as the state owns many dams, and A&R owns a lot of them in terms of providing recreational resources, the things that make our lakes and ponds the water level that people have become accustomed to from a recreation standpoint. Many of those are state-owned, and so about a quarter of them are in poor condition. So again, it's one of those long-term, we built dams many moons ago without really thinking about how we were going to afford to maintain them over time. And they've been underinvested in for decades. This burnt orange, I will say, box here is the Cso Abatement Estimate. Obviously, we don't know the full need in some projects because there is, the communities are still in the process of developing their long-term control plans. But that is a number that came out of the treasurer's report as a rough estimate of the universe of need. We've proposed a significant investment through ARPA dollars here because that's, as we've talked about in committee, as we were talking about S101, we think that that's a really important place to make some progress. It is, we did not sort of put all of the eggs in that basket because there's only so much that you're going to be able to accomplish in a 4-year period, given how much we know, some of these projects are really complicated in terms of ripping up our existing built infrastructure in downtowns to be able to do some of this work. So I've proposed, to make some investment here, but that's where that priority comes from. This is the gray box below here. This $50 million is an important one to me. It's really a area of significant unmet need for my mind. It is working on water and wastewater infrastructure, specifically at mobile home parks. We run into real challenges with mobile home parks with their infrastructure systems that are not up to standard, and there simply isn't capacity to be able to make repairs, and that's a real challenge for the people who live there, and oftentimes these are in low-lying areas as well, so we have sort of flooding and resilience concerns as well. So there's a real need in this space, and one where we, that's part of the reason why the healthy homes concept was in the governor's proposal. That was really primarily focused on the idea of focusing as much of that effort on mobile home parks as possible. It's a real environmental justice concern in Vermont, and one that we would love to be able to put more attention on, but it's tough nuts to crack, especially since many of the ones that are struggling most are privately owned, but privately owned and not, they're not generating significant income for the owners. And so how do we address that challenge that we've had, that we've talked about in the past, where there's private ownership and responsibility there, but if the work is never going to get done, how do we get past that hurdle? So some real need there. And then we talked about the MS4 community, which is the light flux, and then I don't know how to describe that color down in the bottom right hand corner, is lead service line abatement. That is estimated from the national level work that was done by EPA, and is part of the American Jobs Act thought process. One of the interesting things that we heard I've heard in one of the presentations I've heard about the American Jobs Act proposal is that the Biden administration proposes to address all lead service line abatements in the country with these dollars, which would be a remarkable feat and a really important one. So in knowing that, we didn't include additional state effort through ARPA dollars in the governor's proposal, assuming that those dollars were coming. And to step back more broadly, you've heard from the water and wastewater operators around the state, the Rural Waters and the GIMWEAs and others, about the need to invest in those first two blocks, the light blue and the green here on the left, as representing. And we agree. We prioritize within the ARPA dollars those things that we thought were going to be hardest to get to and that didn't necessarily have an easy source or potential future source of funding. So pre-acre stormwater, the village wastewater systems, pre-treatment, doing some dam work, looking at mobile home parks. Those are hard challenges to address. The water and wastewater and drinking water systems have an existing source of funding through the SRFs, and we anticipate that the American Jobs Act will really focus on those traditional existing infrastructure repairs and upgrades. And so assumed in terms of how we thought about, it wasn't a question of priority in terms of the overall perspective, it was a question of how might we seek to fund that going forward. So that's the rundown, and I'm happy to answer questions, as I'm sure you have many.
So I added up, if I added right, I came to 1,904 million, so 1.9 billion. And were these generally, did you have a timeline for most of these investments? I heard like 10 years.
We put a 10-year time frame around as much as we could.
Yeah. Okay, so 190 million a year for 10 years. So it's a sizable, public and private. Got it.
But 200 of our mill ponds are approximately privately owned dams that have been around since the mills have been abandoned. There's a lot of them out there.
And then the other question, complicated, easy question to ask, complicated answer, I suppose. So given that roughly $2 billion investment needed over a decade, then when you all at ANR look at this, how do you prioritize those investments?
Well, I mean, I gave you some of our thought process in terms of how we developed
Yeah,
the ARPA proposal in the context of the potential for additional infrastructure dollars and within the context of existing funding sources.
mhm.
And so that's really sort of how we thought about for that piece is, and to rather than spread, obviously, the governor's proposal was $170 million. That feels like a lot of money, but as we've just described, that gets spread pretty thin pretty quick if you extend it out to all of those buckets. And so our proposal really sort of tried to make really significant progress in some key areas where there might not be other dollars available.
So that would be a 3-acre was one, right? CSOs or another.
So three acre CSOs, the village water and wastewater and pretreatment proposal. There's some for state-owned dams. I totally missed a box on there. The upper right-hand corner, this yellow one, is the anticipated investment primarily between V-Trans and the municipalities and the municipal roads general permit. So yes, it was stormwater generally, because there's a little bit of additional money in there for MRGP compliance and a little bit of money in there for stormwater impaired waterways, but primarily focused on the 3-acre and really thinking about providing engineering support for 3-acre sites so that people will know what they're anticipating in terms of costs of actual construction to do the work, and that we can ensure that there's not a lot of back and forth, because we obviously have a lot of sites that are going to be coming in the door from a permitting perspective really quickly. And so the more we can do to ensure that the engineering work is done to meet our needs of review, the better. So that's a really important first step. And then I think, we've had some real luck. I wouldn't necessarily, we've done some really good work in communities using Northern Borders Regional Commission dollars in communities like Wolcott and Burke to think about distributed wastewater systems to enable those communities to be able to infill and continue to support the folks that want to live there without pushing them out into the undeveloped areas. That really often comes down to a cost issue. It's a twofold. There's a sort of capacity to move a system from idea to engineering and construction, with volunteer boards and part-time clerks and those sorts of dynamics. And then there's the cost in terms of the system rates for users, which are oftentimes out of bounds with what's needed, what a community can afford. And so there's really a great opportunity here to make some progress there that really supports the smart growth goals that we have and other pieces. So that to me is a really important one. As I mentioned, the mobile home park piece under the healthy homes concept. One of the other things that we would propose to do with those dollars is to there is a bunch of housing that is going to be developed as part of this approach, and and a lot of it is going to be retrofitting of existing housing. And it would be great while we're in there to do the work to replace fixtures and washing machines and dryers, and to make those as efficient as possible so that we have better systems while we're in there, and to replace plumbing as needed. That's really the value add at low cost that we're hoping to get out of some of those dollars. So, but I can't. You're asking me to pick from my children. I'm just sort of saying that
Right.
this child is taken care of here. And so I need to figure out how to make sure that this child is taken care of.
Right. So probably for best way, I just want to check my notes. The best way for me to, when I go back over this, to look at this chart and prioritization is to refer to the governor's current ARPA proposals to see which things are being pushed forward at this point.
Yes, and
Okay.
and to round that out with, you know, sort of our thoughts on the where the American Jobs Act money may come, right? But that's
Right.
a sort of TBD, and we all don't know what that's going to look like or how big it's going to be, how the money is going to flow to what sorts of programs. Then the other, you know, the potential pot of money is that, you know, some of you have been talking about, and you have the delegation in here, was sort of potential for earmarks as well for discrete projects. And I think there, to Senator Westman's earlier points and questions in our discussion, I think those are great opportunities for those systems that have developed for the far enough along in the process to be sort of engineering complete and ready to move to construction. Those are great for those types of discrete projects, but they're not good for sort of the whole box concept.
Well, happily, well, we'll see what happens with the infrastructure bill, American Jobs Act. But it does seem as though the two biggest boxes on here also line up with that potential funding. So we may get a boost on the two biggest investments we need to make.
Yeah, and what we didn't do with this was kind of net out contributions within here. So what does the existing sort of funding stream cover? That would be pretty complicated to do. I just wanted to sort of give you a sense of the overall scale.
Okay, all right. So I just had my little alarm pop up that tells me we have 4 minutes to the floor. So we have, in the Zoomiverse, that's a lot of time. Now, does anyone have any last questions for the commissioner while we are visiting? Okay.
I just want to say, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that in the early 90s, when Commissioner Walk was a student of mine, it was the Gifted and Talented program. So I can attest that he is truly gifted.
Okay. Even if you liked his sister better. Got it. Okay. All right. So great. So Commissioner Walk, anything that we didn't ask that you wish we had at some point, anything you want to leave with us before we wrap up?
The only thing that I will leave with you is that for Senator Westman's poor eyes, I will increase the font size of this graphic and resend it to you.
But I also, Mr. Chairman, I want to add, as the president of the Vermont chapter of the Colorblind People's Liberation Front, that when we're doing color coding, we should think as though we were doing this for kindergartners. You want very loud, garish colors, not subtle shades, because there are a lot of colors here that look the same to me. Not a lot, there's a couple.
I think I can fix that too, Senator McCormick.
Yeah, just pretend we're kindergartners.
Okay. Well,
I will leave that there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, some days that's not a stretch. So with that, Commissioner Walk, so this is likely our last formal committee meeting with you for this session. So thank you for your help all year long. And we know we'll be in touch even, as time goes on, but I just wanted to thank you again